Welcome to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. This is Bob Ambrogi. Today's episode is a bit different from our norm. It was recorded as a live video webinar on May 7th, 2020, featuring a 5-person panel of leading experts in law firm innovation. I think you're going to find it interesting. Before we get going, let me just take a moment to thank Josh Becker, Head of Legal Analytics at LexisNexis, who helped assemble the panel and served as co-moderator. Also, a big thanks to Valerie Chan, founder of Platform PR, for helping to organize the panel, entirely pro bono. Last, thanks to Populous Radio for producing and engineering today's show. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, on to this week's interview. Now on to the panel. All right, welcome everybody to a special live video presentation of the Law Next podcast with a panel of some of the nation's leading experts in law firm innovation as we discuss how firms are innovating and driving client value in the midst of a global pandemic. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I'm host of the Law Next podcast, and I'll be moderating today. And I'm going to be joined by a co-moderator, Josh Becker, Head of Legal Analytics at LexisNexis. Josh, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks everyone. Really excited for this. So Bob, thank you for helping lead this. I'm Head of Analytics for LexisNexis, around Lex Machina for many years. And as Head of Legal Analytics, I'm always looking to source the very best thinking around innovation, which is why we gathered these experts here today. We're together navigating uncharted waters, and right now there's a lot of uncertainty, which I think creates opportunity to innovate and better serve our clients. So look forward to our discussion today.
Thanks. And now I'm going to ask each of the panelists to very briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do. And Linda Novosel, since you're in the lower right-hand corner of my screen, I'm going to have you go first.
I was hoping you were going to go alphabetically and then David would be on the hook. Hi, my name is Linda Novosel. I'm the the Chief Innovation and Value Officer at Blank Rome. I've been in this role for about a year and a half, and basically my role involves working with clients and partners on pricing arrangements, on LPM, and innovation strategies and solutions that involve people, process, technology.
Thank you very much, Linda. And Adam Ruttenberg, how are you?
Good. So Adam Ruttenberg, I'm a partner at Cooley and the chairman of our technology committee. So I'm both a practicing lawyer. I've been a partner at Cooley for the last 20 years and have chaired their technology committee, overseeing our technology innovation efforts for the last 15 years.
All right. And let me turn now to Meredith Williams-Range.
Hello, I am Meredith Williams-Range. I'm the Chief Knowledge and Client Value Officer with Sherman & Sterling out of New York. I have been in this current role for 2 years, but prior to that, I spent 18 years with a different firm in multiple roles as an attorney as well as a CKO. I also spent time as president for the International Legal Technology Association. The team I lead now is a conglomerate of different departments that are really front-facing with the client. So it's everything with onboarding of the client, with conflicts, ethics, everything that you can imagine, to LPM, budget strategy, pricing strategy, management strategy, data analytics that go along with that. Knowledge and research also kind of fits into that full structure. So anything to bring value to the client and that front-facing with them is the team that I have.
Thank you very much. And finally, David Cambria.
Hi, I'm David Cambria. I'm the Chief Services Officer with Baker & McKenzie. I've been with the firm about 2 years almost now. Prior to joining the firm, I spent the bulk of my career with in-house law departments, helping them navigate and manage the organization of the law department and the delivery of legal services to the business. At Baker McKenzie, I oversee a team that works on legal project management, pricing strategy, alternative legal services, business management, and also our service design function. I'm also a sitting member on our innovation committee.
So I know that all of you are involved in one way, shape, or form or another in innovation at your firm, probably depending on how you define innovation and how you think about it. But what I wanted to start with was how the last month has changed things for you. How has it altered your perspective or priorities around innovation at your firm? Linda, you're Chief Innovation Officer. How about for you?
In the last 2 months, actually, despite all of the awful things that are going on in the world, I actually have been really invigorated and excited about what we've seen over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And that is because we have been forced to change so dramatically in a transformational way by operating at home, having each of our partners and employees operating remotely, and being able to continue to serve the client in a way that has been very different than before. So I think it has presented a multitude of opportunities and has opened up, I think, the acceleration of the adoption of new ways of doing things. People are realizing that, okay, I don't have to work down the hall from an associate to be able to work effectively with that person. So there are lots of opportunities today that I 3 months ago might have said, okay, we're going to get there, but we're not going to get there as quickly as 2 months from now.
And let me just say, I'd like to, let's have this be a conversation, and don't feel like you have to wait for me to call on you to speak to what we're talking about. But does that resonate with any of the other panelists? Anybody else want to comment on that?
I'll be glad to. We've seen a decade of innovation in 2 months. And that's not, that's just honesty. A lot of times in the roles that we play, it's like we're pushing that innovation boulder up the hill, and culture of an organization is pushing back sometimes. Just it takes a little bit longer to do that. That boulder seems to be flying up that hill at this precise time. So innovation in our mind is always the people, the process, the technology, and the data. So it's not always about the tech, although people have been much more accepting of the technology. But what we have seen is the acceptance to change any process that is not as efficient as it possibly can when a person is working remotely. It's, as Linda referenced, the acceptance of working from home, the acceptance of doing everything over Zoom, the acceptance of serving the client very, very differently. We've been able to churn out process improvement and tackle some of the hardest processes that were most ingrained at Sherman in the past 2 months, simply because that barrier is there gone, and there's that acceptance. And I don't think that acceptance of that new change is going to go away.
Yeah,
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to add, I think when you think about, for example, how quickly we've transitioned to remote work and some of the other tools we put in place to address the needs of our clients, I think the adaptability and dedication that we've been all focused on over the last decade since the outset of the Great Recession last time is on full display now. It's like a person who suddenly is in the limelight or the spotlight, who after a long career of grinding it out finally becomes famous after being out there for 10 years. And I think look, at two reasons that the transition continues to happen at the pace it is one, we had no choice in the matter, given what the world events were, but I think also the infrastructure was already in place. That the hard choices were really were already being navigated throughout the process. And so if you think about trying to do this when the Great Recession that happened in 2008 and 2009, I think it would have been unthinkable to think about the agility to which we've done that. But today the work has been done, and I think you start to see that pivot happening today because of the work that's been done.
Yeah, so David, I think that it's an interesting point, and one that I think is worth exploring a bit, because I'm not sure that every firm's in that position, right? So right. At least, thankfully, Cooley is, and all of your firms are, and right. So the pivot to what's happened in the last month has accelerated the adoption of technology that already existed. But at the same time, I know of a number of firms where they didn't have that infrastructure already in place. And this has been a struggle for them because now they're trying to do two things at once, right? They're trying to roll out new technology in a virtualized environment where they're not all together, and at the same time get people trained in to adopt that technology. And that's been a struggle for some firms and a challenge for some firms. And I don't think every firm has been fortunate to have the foresight to necessarily have already pivoted to their remote working solutions, have voice over IP phones, already have conference calling solutions, video conference calling solutions in place. And I've dealt with a number of firms who haven't had that luxury and are struggling to rapidly put those things in place, which, as we all know, comes with its own set of problems. For those of us who already had built that infrastructure and spent years investing in it, then yeah, it's led to rapid adoption, where you might have had 60% adoption rates. Now you're getting 100% because people are forced to, if they don't have a choice, and let people be more open to process changes that come about with that adoption. But I'm not sure that everybody's in that spot.
And I think that's a fair point. I think it's also fair to state that a lot of the clients we tend to serve are also not in that same point.
Right.
They're looking for ways to deal with the ever-growing complexities of their business with a drive to reduce their budgets and how they're going to deliver legal services. But in fact, they can't use the methods that they used last time because last time already happened. There's already been a compression on rates. There's already been a compression on budgets within law departments and a move to bring some of that work in-house. Well, the reality of it is that as they think about moving forward in these newer times, they have to come up with the next generation of things to solve some of those problems, just because the tools that they used in 08 and 09 just aren't there as options. I can't not bring more people in-house. And really, as we all know on the law firm side, productivity is down because of the in-house folks being brought in, but also rate pressure can only take you so far in actually driving overall productivity for what we're trying to deliver to our clients and also to our businesses.
So has this been a seamless transition for those of you who had the infrastructure in place, or have there been innovations, if you want to call them that you've kind of had to rapidly iterate in some way?
I was really impressed by how quickly we were able to pivot. We tested it in one of our major offices on a Friday afternoon, and it worked well. On Monday afternoon, we got a notice from the city and where our largest office is located, saying they were shutting down all non-essential businesses by the end of that day. And so we had to pivot entirely to a remote workforce within 12 hours. So it was really amazing. And we were lucky that we had a brand new CIO who had gotten up to speed on the issues, thankfully, before this hit, but it moved very quickly and pretty non-eventfully.
Is that same for others of you?
Yeah, in fact, from a Cooley perspective, we had just recently built out a New York office space that was predicated on, in some sense, a remote working environment. In other words, even though people were all in the offices, the voice over IP phone, we got rid of desktop phones. We were using only voice over IP on iPads as our desk phones. We had all that infrastructure in place. So in essence, even though we were in the office, we were working remotely. We just didn't know it. And so the transition, because we made that investment, and that was more luck than anything else, that we had built out that office and opened it about 6 months before this all hit, that actually was perfectly seamless for us. But I think the one piece that sort of forced us to pivot wasn't so much the technology piece, which was seamless, but how we interact with our associates and our colleagues, and how we interact with our clients had to radically shift overnight.
Yeah,
I would agree with you, Adam. So for us, we had actually started moving to a cloud-first strategy 2 years ago. So we were working in the cloud already and pushing all that we can into that world, from email, documents, you name it, getting us there. So we actually had a very seamless process. It was very similar to what you talked about, Linda. It was on a Wednesday, we had decided we're going to go this direction and have different cycles of teams, and 2 days later, full remote.
Yeah.
And so it was, okay, 48 hours later, what did we miss? We did have a couple of things that we pushed through, and my favorite story from it is we were able to push Zoom through in 36 hours, which when in a normal course at Sherman 36 days would not have been long enough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had to do certain things like that, but that's to your point, Adam, because what we found is having phone calls to do the mentorship with the associates or to have the conversation with some of the clients. It's fine to do some of that over phone, but you can't do all of that. And we as lawyers are still apprentices, and that's how we still learn from some of the partners. And so we had to make certain that Zoom in particular was the way to bring human back into the conversation. So you could watch, you could see the dynamics, you could see someone's body language if they weren't responding well. And it allowed you to have more human. Oddly enough, it brought human back in, and that's an odd thing to say, but it allowed us to be able to work together, still be able to educate our younger lawyers, and be able to have our client conversations. Now, did we have to really focus on how to use that in the right way? Absolutely, because it is a different mechanism to have a conversation where the 6 of us can see each other on the screen versus around a conference room table where you can kind of interact in a very personal way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think also that to add to that, you know, it cannot be it cannot go without stating that the mind shift of the end users was prevalent in a way that it wasn't in the past. That whenever you have a mix of people, technology, and process, there's adoption that has to happen, no matter how flawless it is in its execution. And we had great results in that regard. There are people involved, and when people are involved, then there's changes in behavior and habits that have to happen. You have to do that in a way that pushes adoption. And I think the events that have happened since the COVID crisis really have put people's guards down with regard to some of that. And having that open mind, or the beginner's mindset, if you will, on a lot of these things has really meant that people are experimenting with the technology. They are actually engaging with the technology and finding different ways of working that maybe there wasn't headspace to do that in the past. And I think that's an important part about the adoption and what we tend to see here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really interesting. It brings up a number of topics around, because we've heard that, I've heard that a number of firms are saying that actually they accelerated the adoption of technology at that firm. And Meredith, I love what you said, because when we talked earlier, you also said, there's no when we get back to work, right? People are like, oh, when we get back to work. You're like, there's no when we get back to work. We are at work.
That's what I like to say now is I'm so tired of people saying to me, if we can just get back to work. No, you're stating the wrong thing. We are at work.
We are at work.
We are at work. This is work. And we have to find a new way to do that. And for some, that's a very easy transition. And for some, that's very difficult. And so it's a process for each person. But we've watched that. But there's not a day that has passed in the past 2 months that I have not heard that every single day from at least one person. If we can just get back to work, we're at work. And I don't want to speak for others. We're busy, and that's a good thing. And let's keep that moving. Let's find those new ways to serve the clients. Let's find those new ways to run with what we've got. But this is work. Yeah.
Again, I think it's fascinating. You're at a 150-year-old firm, and you're saying that the amount of acceleration just in the last 2 months, is just incredible. I wanted to turn, and something Bob and I discussed, is how has the focus of innovation changed at your firm maybe in the last couple of months? What types of projects are now on the back burner that were on the front burner before, and what type of projects have been accelerated? And maybe as part of that, you can maybe give one concrete example of innovation at your firm in this time for each of you.
I can go first if you want, Josh. So I think at Cooley, what has changed radically is the order of priority for projects, right? So where we might have been playing around with artificial intelligence solutions or other things, those have taken a back seat to things about the health and wellness of our employees, or the way that work is assigned, or the way that mentoring is done, or the way that we interact with our clients, which has really sort of gotten all pushed to the forefront because, as we were just talking about, right, that is essential to make sure that this is all working in the best possible way, not just for ourselves and our colleagues, but also for our clients. And so I think we've seen a radical shift. And for example, we've prioritized and spent a bunch of time now finding a better automated system to assign and monitor workflow and utilization, right? So that we make sure everybody's getting fair work, because everyone's remote, and if they're not speaking up and we don't know if they're struggling, we have to have early indicators of that. And so we're sort of prioritizing the implementation and selection of technologies that sort of support those types of initiatives. Or Cooley launched a COVID portal resource for our clients, right? Because both because it's good business development and it's good technology, but also because we have to stay in front of our clients. We have to help them because they're struggling right now. And so sort of prioritize sort of technologies like that. So it's really shifted from things that we think may have, which are really good long-term things, which we're still working on, to things we have to prioritize and get out now. And so those things have sort of moved to the front of the line for us.
For us, I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. Everything around process. Focusing on process improvement every way possible has been a very critical thing, and keeping that, going with the remote mind first. Process. Data is now everyone's best friend, and I'll give you some concrete examples. And no one's afraid of the cloud any longer, which is fantastic because it's been 2 years of telling people not to be. So it's great that no one is. So on the cloud side, we were in the process of moving to iManage in the cloud, and now, and 2 months ago, if you had asked me how's that going to roll out, going to happen, Plan A and Plan B went out the window, and virtual rollout, give it to me now. I never thought I would hear that from 70% of the partners, and it was a shocking moment to say that acceptance is there. And process-wise, before this all started, about a year ago, we had started a process around matter planning and matter mapping for every area of law, and building out kind of all the pricing, leveraging strategies and precedent and knowledge and everything else. And that's accelerated rapidly. And we've been leading online workshops with pretty much every practice area to kind of spring load that. But the bucket where it has really accelerated is in the data. And that's data to our clients, and it's data for us to analyze, to predict models going forward. It's using everything internally that we know about our clients, about our matters, overlaying that with financial health of clients. What is the longevity? Where is their growth? Overlaying things like what is the contagion cycle in a country versus our office locations there, and when are we going to start to see uptick in transactional work? It's looking at data, overlaying both internal and external to look at a new pipeline type of model, and that's a big shift for us. So we have a data team internally that sits in multiple groups, but come together to really focus on that, and that has been the area that we have just rapidly had to speed up. Is everything focused on how we can use that data both to serve the client and to provide them as much as we possibly can, like around employment, benefits, unemployment, other things around state regulatory, et cetera. And then how do we use that data internally to best serve us as a business model?
Please go ahead, Linda.
Oh, thank you, David. I was just going to say I agree with the comments that Meredith made. We are experiencing the same types of priorities. I would say that in the last year and a half, we have made significant strides in introducing the concept of innovation to our lawyers and to our firm. And in fact, in 2019, we held an innovation challenge. We had some winners that were rewarded as a result of that challenge. And we have been implementing those projects over the last but probably 6 months. That has not stopped, and yet we have continued to try to innovate over the last 2 months, in the sense that we're working with clients to figure out what their new needs are and how can we meet those needs in the most efficient manner. Because I oversee the pricing and LPM team, it is very important and something that is near and dear to a lot of our clients' hearts, and that is how can we minimize our costs right now and have you deliver the greatest value. And so we're really looking at that people, process, technology, both from a client service team level, but also a practice level and at a firm-wide level.
And I was going to look at, I think Baker McKenzie, like a lot of us on this call, they at the end of the day, it's about how do we actually serve our clients and do that in a very efficient, effective way. And that's always been a goal of the firms, and it's certainly a goal at Baker McKenzie. What I think is fascinating about the innovations and where we've come together more is that when you talk about partnership, that's interesting on some level, but sustainable partnership really requires an alignment of interests,
yes,
an alignment of goals. And so a lot of what has driven or been driven over the last few weeks is not just about the resources and the doctrinal knowledge that each of our firms possesses, but really how do we actually align that knowledge to the goals and interests of the clients who are now more than ever really sitting at the table and rolling up their shirt sleeves and getting to the heart of those discussions, which I think have been stymied or have actually been stalled from time to time because it was hard to put a framework around that in coming up with some of the end results. And so at Baker, yes, we have a lot of the resources that are shared by other firms, but we are doing the other things that Meredith and Linda and Adam talk about relative to data and relative to insights and practice wisdom to tie that together to the ultimate aligned interest of the client.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support Law Next. And now, let's continue this week's interview. You've all talked about serving the client and communicating with the client. Somebody in the audience asked this question that's relevant to that, which is how do you convince or assure clients that the quality of the legal services your firm is providing during this time remains as high as ever?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? You have to demonstrate the value that they would have expected to receive regardless of the firm that they're using. You have to deliver on time. You have to make sure that you're engaging them in critical discussions about what their needs are and what their priorities are, and manage their expectations and they manage ours so that we are delivering the value that they expect. In terms of quality, if we weren't producing a quality product before this crisis, I think that would be probably a real problem going forward. And
right.
They're going to be in a position, they're certainly in a more leveraged position at this point to make decisions regarding their outside counsel, and we need to make sure that we deliver that quality. Quality is paramount. That's table stakes now. It's really value that is important.
Yeah, it is table stakes, but I would say it's also hard to define, and part of what the alignment of interest is all about is how do you define client or how do you define quality or how do you define value? How do we actually measure that to make sure we're meeting that goals? I do agree, Linda, it's table stakes that if at this point someone is coming to your firm and doesn't have a sense of confidence in the legal abilities or the abilities to deliver legal services, this is probably not the time they're going to try something new with a partner they haven't had. But it really is about, you can't talk about these terms in the abstract. You actually have to have some way to measure what are those quality outcomes, what are those value outcomes that bring us to that mutual combined alignment of interest, but also a mutual agreement that, yes, this is what the outcome was. Sometimes it's speed and efficiency. Excuse me. Sometimes it's dealing with complex issues. Other times the quality is about having the infrastructure and the platform by which we can solve a very complex problem across multiple jurisdictions. And then really trying to measure all that is part of the discussion that a lot of this situation is driving.
Yeah, and I would have to add to that, you have to talk to the client. You have to prove to them that you're listening to them is one of the most critical components. And I think it goes to what you said, David, aligning the interest. You're not asking them how you can serve them right now because their demand is shifting. They may not be doing an IPO right now, but they absolutely need you to guide them on governance around their unemployment benefits and things like that. Listen to what their needs are, have that conversation, bring in and co-collaborate within the organization. That's what the client's expecting from us right now, is they're expecting us to listen to them, prove that we're listening to them, shift the demand accordingly, and still deliver at the highest quality. Because if we don't do that, they will go to any of the other squares on the screen or somewhere else.
That's right.
Yeah, but I think though, if you think about it and take a step back, right, we're talking about two different things. On one hand, we're talking about, as Linda alluded to, the substantive legal stuff. That hasn't changed. Nothing's changed there. And so they either have confidence in you or they don't have confidence in you around the delivery of those legal services. And generally clients are, as much as they hire firms, they're also hiring people. And those people are the people, right? We're a people business. And so there's going to be some conflict. I don't think there's any, if you have to convince people that the quality of service, that the substantive knowledge hasn't changed, well, then you've already lost. But at the same time, it's about client service, right? That's the second part of this. And I think that's really what people are focused on right here. And what we're talking about is, can you still deliver the same client service that I was getting before in this environment? And that's really dependent on the technology and everything else. And what I have found personally is I've had more face-to-face, Zoom-based calls with my clients over the last month than I'd had in the previous 6 months combined, because the habit when I was in the office was they'd call my phone, I'd pick up the phone, and I'd talk to them, right? And it would be a perfectly pleasant phone conversation, but I actually didn't see them, right? Now the default is, let's jump on a video call, right? And so I'm actually seeing them more. In some sense, it's even easier to sort of have that personal connection and deliver that client service, because you're able to actually have more face-to-face interactions with your clients.
Yeah.
And also, you know, Adam, I know you've gone above and beyond in a way. And you've got something coming out next week. Is there anything you can tease us about? I know Lex has been involved a bit from the data side, but you're working on something around collaboration. Anything you can tell us?
Sure. I mean, look, so as part of this, as part of our long-standing innovation plans, we had sort of been working on a way to remove some of those frustrations that between the client-lawyer interactions. And we've been working on that for about 18 months. So hopefully next week, we'll be announcing that platform that we've been working on. We've been working on with a number of other law firms to develop this platform that should be coming out soon. But it's really going to be aimed at sort of removing some of those really small but easy frustrations that clients have with their interaction with the lawyers, whether it's, hey, I can't get my documents exchanged with you in a good way because you can't get into Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever it might be, or I want real-time status of what's happening in my matters or whatever. So we've worked on a platform to try to remove, in conjunction with some other law firms and some clients, some of those frustrations out of the system to try to deliver better client service. We didn't do it with this in mind by any stretch of the imagination, because it's been going on for a long time. But certainly it's going to be, we've been in beta now for about a month, and we're going to continue to be in beta for a little bit. But it's been this has sort of driven home the need for it.
We've been talking about how firm can work with its clients. Meredith, let me put you on the spot, because I read an interview with you in which you said that one of the greatest challenges of your job is getting your internal teams out of silos and get them to work together. So how does this work from home world exacerbate or address, how do you deal with that issue in this work from home world?
That's a great question. I'll kind of give you a quick response to best I can. So, I mean, we had started breaking down those silos for the past 2 years, or at least as long as I've been here. And one of the reasons the client value team was created is because those departments all existed prior, and then no one really spoke to each other, which was fine, but we're all trying to serve the same clients. And if we can do that as a holistic team, that's the better way to do that. So again, going back to the human element to stuff, you've got to have the conversation. You've got to have the Zoom calls. So that's exactly what we've been doing, is to try to have those calls so that teams can cross-pollinate and cross-work. And I'll just give you a small example of that. Is never having just one team. Like, we had one of our process innovation workshops yesterday for one of our practice areas about one particular area of law, but having multiple leaders lead that together from different departments. That way they're forced to work together in a unique way for a common goal, which is all around profitability and client service. And that is where we have found kind of the breakdown. So we force people outside of their comfort zone, outside of their kind of main area that they're practicing in, to force them to do that together. And we've seen really that even in this COVID-19 and the Zoom world that we're in, that has continued. It's not going to stop. We have to kind of force that collaboration as much as we possibly can. And that starts at the top. I look at my role as the client value officer. I have to work very closely with all of my other C-levels. I'm very lucky and blessed in that respect, because I have a lot of great ones that I get to push that boulder along with, and no other greater ones than, people like my CTO, who I jokingly call my work spouse, because I see and speak to him more than I talk to my real spouse. And, we work as one unit, because the competition is not in the firm. The competition is outside. And if we're all trying to go towards that same bucket and we preach that from our level all the way down, then that forces people outside of that comfort zone. And so that's what we keep trying to do every single day.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that? But how do you maintain that culture, that cohesiveness of the firm when you're all working from home?
Well,
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, Linda.
No, go on, David. You deferred to me last time. Go ahead.
That's Adam. Go ahead.
Oh, it was
That's
Adam.
me.
Okay.
So,
Please go ahead.
I think Robert, you said a key word there, and I think this is what's underlying, I think what Meredith just said, which is really important, which is it's really not, this isn't about innovation or about technology, it's about culture preservation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's how do you preserve your culture in an environment when you're not all together all the time anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the challenges that Meredith was speaking to, and I think that we're all faced with. And some of that is out of our control. It's not an innovation thing. It's not a technology thing. It's quite honestly, how strong was our culture to start with, right? Because if it was really strong, then it's likely to survive through this time. If it was particularly weak, it's likely to fracture. I mean, this is when you stress the system, right? That's when the cracks start to emerge. And if it was middling, it'll probably survive as well. But it's a question of what incremental steps can we take to sort of maintain that cohesiveness of that culture in times when we're apart.
Yeah. Linda, did you want to comment on that? Or?
Yeah, I would just add that, the cross-functional approach is a really important one. It requires people to step in the shoes of other people and look at things from a different perspective. We have actually, next week, we'll be holding a virtual hackathon of a cross-departmental group of people. And it's a really cool way for us to get these people, even though they're not in the office, where we might bring them together in a conference room on so we do that. We did this before. We want to continue to do this because we think that doing so really spurs innovation and new ideas and excitement around those new ideas. So it is important that we do that, and it'll be an interesting thing to see how it works virtually.
Yeah. Have a virtual happy hour. That's what we try to do.
We've done that too. Yeah.
I was gonna say,
That's the important
so
stuff.
important. Yeah.
That is the important stuff.
I totally agree.
Way too many of those, unfortunately.
yeah.
But they're needed.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, I mean, Lex Machina has had those, and I've been in some of those. And also yesterday there was a virtual tour of a animal rescue farm. So someone was there and, giving a virtual tour. And, I had most of the company was on there. And it was kind of fun to kind of keep everyone together.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the questions I'm curious about is now that, I want to ask what happens when we return to work, because we already know we're all working. Okay.
Return to the office.
There you go, return to the office.
Do we return to the office? I guess that's the question. I mean, what happens when you can return to the office, but some people have discovered they kind of like it this way?
Well, I don't think we're going to all return to the office and things are going to be hunky-dory. I think we're going to see some ebbs and flows in this crisis. I think we'll probably be sheltered in place in the future. But I'd also, to your point, believe that there will be people who really like the idea of working remotely and they find that they're much more profitable and can still serve the client and meet the client's needs, and they have the same interactions with the client. It's going to be up to individual firms to set their standard. And in order to maintain culture, we really have to address that. And that is a crucial part of making sure that we do maintain that culture. Some firms will be perfectly able to maintain the culture while people are working remotely. And I think we have done a very good job of doing that, working remotely. But we also have a lot of people who can't work remotely. So in fairness to them, we want to be able to make sure that we have the people in the office that we need to have.
Yeah. It's going to be a combination. We're not going to see the full brick and mortar that we once saw. We're not. The naysayers at all firms, and this is not just the four of us, but all firms have said we have to be in the office, we have to do this, and that this has kind of shattered that reality for a lot of people. And we have to be honest about that. And if we're not asking that question, then that's not going to serve us long term. And that's the shift of the business model. And so you have to be realistic about what we call the future of work. What is that going to look like? How are we going to recruit differently? What kind of office spaces do we need? Do we need swing spaces? Do we need to go into lower cost resource areas? These are all the questions that each of us, and I think every law firm and every business in particular, is asking and should be asking. What that looks like, I can't sit here and tell you. I think it's going to definitely be a combination where we have some that go in, some don't. We have some that fly in for different conversations. We have Zoom. It's going to look different. We won't go back. I don't think in any respect of life will we fully go back to what was.
Yeah.
And sitting and living in New York, I can say that it's never going to go back to what it once was. And the working aspect of that is one critical part. No one's going to want to commute for 2 hours to come into the office for an 8-hour day and then another 2 hours back home every day of the week any longer.
Knowing that they can be fully productive at home.
Correct. And people, I think, are finding they want more of that work-life balance. I know I find that with my daughter and my spouse and wanting to have a little bit more of that. So we have to navigate through that. And I think, as Linda said, this is not over anytime soon. We're going to have to navigate through that globally for a longer period of time. And I don't think any of us have those answers yet, because I don't think the world has those answers yet.
Yeah.
I agree.
That actually raises a question. There are a couple of questions that have been come in from the audience that are relevant to that. One is how law schools could be better preparing students for perhaps what could be an extended, new normal of working in a more distributed way and making greater use of technology. So that's part of it. And then another question, but that's also related, is, do you see this in some way as actually creating new jobs, new roles within law firms that are tied to this distributed environment?
So I'd like to start with that if I could, which is, one, we're fortunate Baker McKenzie does support a lot of different initiatives at law schools. We do one over in Europe with Bucyrus, that law school, and the Institute for the Future of Law Practice here. And I think when you think about what those organizations are attempting to do, it's really provide lawyer capabilities and skills beyond the doctrinal knowledge of lawyering, which is the process piece, the technology piece, the understanding and the new ways of working. And so law schools that have adopted those programs and law students who have adopted that way of thinking, one, we're going to be very valuable to their clients anyways, because the application of legal discipline to business problems is a key component to good lawyering and the future of lawyering. I think now more than ever, as you're trying to keep pace with the ever-changing, the rate of change in a post-COVID world, those skills become more relevant and more prominent in how you go about solving those problems. And so law schools that continue to embrace that and see that as an evolution, I think will continue to serve their students quite well on that journey. And I think it's not intuitive yet where it actually goes, because I think the dynamics have changed so much. So our understanding of what that was about isn't as clear as it once was. And I would argue that, you might have more predictions about the future based on the last 2 weeks of what's happened than you have over the last 2 years. And I was, one of our partners we work with was actually lamenting on that comment, that a lot of the work they do and the models they've built around that, you're actually getting more prediction and insight of 2 weeks worth of data as opposed to the last several years. And I found that to be interesting and really, again, one of those things where law schools have been driving towards that for their law students. And then it's a very important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, on the law school front, I think one of the things that I've always thought that law schools could do a better job of, quite honestly, is preparing law students not just to be great lawyers. They do a great job at that, but in understanding the business of law, right? The practicalities of what does it mean to be a lawyer, whether you're in-house, whether you're in public service working for the government, or you're working at a big firm. Almost all lawyers, I know I did when I came out of law school, you didn't have a clue about actually how to practice law. You knew how to be a really good lawyer, you knew the law, you had all the thinking skills and all the other skills, but you actually didn't know how to practically be a lawyer. And I think one of the things, especially in this environment, that law schools could do a much better job is start to offer some classes, provide some training and mentorship to law students on that aspect of the law, whether it's how to use technology better, especially as we move to, I guess, just our question about sort of online dispute resolution and things like that. To Mara's point, we're not going back to a normal that was that from before, right? So some of the stuff, whether it's online dispute resolution or the fact that we're not going to be traveling to face-to-face negotiations anymore, or some of these other things are here to stay. And if students don't understand how to leverage technology in an effective way in those sort of situations, they're at a disadvantage.
And I think that would have been true even before COVID-19,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
I agree with you
from law
completely.
school a long time ago, I didn't have any idea how to actually practice law. I knew a lot about the substantive law that I studied. And so as we've faced these crises over time, and as the role of the lawyer has changed over time, and no longer is a lawyer just able to sit head down and perform substantive work, that we introduced the concept of you got to go out and develop business. And then not only do you have to develop business, but you have to manage your practice like you would manage a business. And now not only do we have to manage a practice as a business and develop business, we also need to maintain the culture of our firm. And how do we do that in a way that we are, when we're working remotely and we're not able to see the people that we would see if we were in the office? And, you know, one of the biggest, one of the biggest challenges for law firms is that law firms tend to be a, out of sight, out of mind sort of organization. And as the law firms have expanded over the years, we've gradually gotten better at that. But in smaller organizations, they have not necessarily they haven't addressed that. And that is something that is going to be more challenging as we go forward with on and off remote working.
Yeah.
I agree with every comment that's been made. I just a couple of points around that. We've seen that where we're getting, I call a law student a commodity because that's what we're buying. It's what we're buying in a sense, and we're not really getting everything that we need from that commodity. And to your point, Adam, I was the same way coming out of law school. I understood the substantive area. I had no idea how to do anything, and I had no idea how the business ran or what were the levers to pull for profit. Or I had no idea about any of that. But I think, Linda, you said this was happening before COVID-19.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the law schools were already focused on innovation. One that I know that I've seen up hand and close is Cornell has started an LLM innovation program. And to watch those law students go that extra year to understand how to innovate, and they even get access to like Neota Logic, and one of the things that they get to do is they get to work with Access to Justice and nonprofits around different areas to figure out how to develop a process application that then gets given to that nonprofit. It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But that teaches them, one, to think about how they're practicing law and how effectively can they do that. And that's something that every one of us need to do.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I actually, since I was at JD MBA at Stanford, the dean, Paul Brest at the time, asked me to try to help him. He was doing an organizational behavior class, which is common at business schools, to do one over at the law school. And then Dan Cooperman, who was an advisor to us, was the GC of Apple, did, I think, the first class on being in-house at Stanford Law School. But I find that even though Lex Machina, which is, again, analytics about behavior, about the actors in litigation, and then Context, which is now another Lexis product, also came out of Stanford Law, which is analytics about language, right? What language do judges rely on in their opinions, and how can you practice better by understanding that? Even though those both came out of Stanford, I still feel that Stanford does not do a good job of preparing students to, kind of for the modern legal experience, and really do enough around, training, in technology and innovation. So that LLM program is really interesting.
I think the organizational development aspect is something that I have not heard about other law firms doing. And to me, that's really progressive, because that is the biggest challenge of succeeding in a law firm is understanding how it operates, right? For associates to come in and understand how to move up the ladder, they need to understand who to be in front of and how to maintain that presence. And particularly now where they're going to be working remotely, how do they do that?
Yeah. I just want to get back to the data piece for a minute. Meredith, but you said that data is, one of your number one things during this time. And Linda, we mentioned that too. And I know you kind of recently, you guys have kind of gone all in on Lex Machina, and you're talking about data and analytics is a big focus during this time. Do you feel that lawyers, again, sometimes in all legal products, and I also run our accelerator program, you find people buy new technologies. Sometimes they use them widely, sometimes they sit on the shelf. Are you finding this being a time where lawyers are sort of taking the time to learn some new technologies, or do you feel that this is a good time for data analytics at your firm, Linda, and maybe others can comment?
I think it's a great time. What I would say is that the behind the scenes data analytics is something that my team has been managing. So I think if we were to open that up to partners, they might just glaze over and be lost forever. But when they see the output that it yields, I think that they like it very much and the clients like it very much. So they see the benefit of it, but the actual process of making it happen is much more granular and involved than I think they want to be.
I would agree with Linda. And what we try to do, and the way we explain it, it's data analytics to us. But what we're doing is we're taking data to information to knowledge and insight. Yeah. And so what we provide back, so what we provide to them are insight dashboards so that they can get a feel for what is going on with just, here are the 10 insights that you need to know of all that we did with all this data. We analyzed 5 years worth of X, Y, and Z, both internally and externally, but here's what that means. Because they're, exactly, because that's what they can consume and that's what they want. They want kind of the understanding of that. What are the conclusions that you're able to draw? Right. As we like to say, the data is going to tell a story. You may not like the story, but it's going to tell you a story one way or the other. And we can't ask questions of the data in the beginning. We need to let the data ask the questions. So we grab it, we analyze it, and then we figure out what the right questions and answers are from there.
Right, because I think that method, which I'm a proponent of as well, Meredith, is really about how do you drive people to action. And at the end of the day, our lawyers and the practices that we have at our firms are all about solving the problems and actioning for our clients. And so separating that signal from noise is very important, driving them towards an action and driving them towards a direction where they can impart their practice wisdom onto those pieces are really what our clients look for in the value that are being provided from the firms. And so I agree with you on your analysis of that.
Can I ask? I think we're all evangelists on this conference, but is there a danger? Is there a concern in the kind of rapid adoption and deployment of technology that we're seeing in some places? Is there a danger either to the client or to the lawyers involved that we should be thinking about?
I feel pretty strongly that you can't really tackle technology until you have addressed the people and process. So if you go out and you buy a tool or you build a tool because you think you might need something, or you want to automate something, but you haven't really thought through how did we do it before and who were the people that were doing it and how is the client benefiting it, you can get yourself into hot water. But also I think that just having technology for the sake of having it isn't necessarily going to add value to the client. And we need to make sure that we're going to be adding value to the client, that we're going to be able to adopt that technology. So it has to be very thoughtful. And while I think technology is an enabler of innovation, it isn't the driver of innovation, and it shouldn't be the driver.
Yeah, and Linda, I would echo that. I mean, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. It really has to be tied to broader strategic initiatives, has to be tied to your brand and the services you want to provide to your client. Just because you think it may help in one piece, it may not tie into the overall ideas and strategies of what you're trying to do as a firm. And so what technology and innovation can do is accelerate the rate at which I get off track even faster. That's another thing. So while it can drive you to a lot of the solutions, and a lot of us are very focused on that, applying it in a way that isn't consistent with what you're doing can also have very quick exponential negative impacts on an organization. Yeah. I think that's important too.
And Robert, I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is there's the elephant in the room for all of this, which is data security, right? Which is, you could, if you rush out and just grab technology for the sake of grabbing technology, or you let your individual lawyers grab technology for the sake of grabbing technology, you can create all sorts of problems from a data security and a privacy perspective. And so being thoughtful about, again, being open enough to innovate, but thoughtful enough to protect from a data security perspective is often a critical balance, and one that creates a lot of tension, right? Because as everyone says, yeah, you can make it really secure, but then it's not usable, or right, there's always this trade-off and a balance, right? And so that's always something that I think is in a rush to innovate, especially in an environment like this where everyone's doing it really rapidly. That's something that you really got to be careful about.
Yeah, I'll add just a couple of points to that. There's two things that can get eroded with technology, regardless of COVID-19. One is education, and two is culture. And you have to pay attention to both of those. And you just look at technology in as we talked about law schools and such like that. But think about how we as young lawyers learned how to do different functions. Like learning how to do diligence taught me understanding of agreements that were going into that and what I needed to understand for the negotiation, that type of stuff. Being in person with people taught me how to navigate conflict and different conversation. You know, we have to be very careful that some of that doesn't get eroded. And what it is we just have to find new ways to do it. And that's really it, where the hand of the technology and the hand of the person learning go together, and they learn at the same time. And as we've talked about, the culture, you know, we have to protect whatever that is and make certain, one, that it was strong before all of this, and it's continuing on afterwards. Because if we're all going to do this and we're never going to see each other, then that creates a different type of culture with different type of people, and you have to be ready for what that looks like.
Yeah. I hate to ask people to prognosticate, but I wonder if you could all comment on kind of what you see as perhaps the lasting change or permanent change that might happen either within your firm or to the legal profession more broadly as a result of this pandemic. Anybody want to?
I think I've already given mine. I'm sorry. This
well, and we've been talking about it a lot, throughout this hour. I know that, but
well, personally, I think it's what we're doing right now, right? I mean, the video conference, while it's always been around, the prevalence of it, and I'm not saying necessarily Zoom, it's going to be whether it's Teams or Zoom or whoever, right? But the prevalence of video conferencing, whether it is in negotiations or dispute resolution or anything else, that is now a permanent fixture of our environment on a go-forward basis, and we're never going back on that front. So I mean, I feel like that's kind of a cop-out because it's the easiest prediction to make, which is why I want to make it first before anyone else got there.
I also think Meredith mentioned space earlier, and I think we are in the unique position where we're evaluating a lease for one of our largest offices, and this is the prime opportunity for us to evaluate really how much space we need, and are we going to need as much space as we would have thought before the COVID-19 crisis. So I think a lot of these changes will become permanent. They're going to be embedded in the culture of law firms.
Yeah.
I would just add that I think some of the fear has been reduced and some of the resistance has been reduced. It's not going away, but I think we have shifted now to the next level of trying to experiment, trying to embrace some of the change that's around us in ways that perhaps we weren't doing before that. I think there's an increased empathy not only with each other within our law firms, in our functions within law firms, but as amongst clients and the law firms. I think this will prove and give people a sense of confidence that they hadn't had before, that, you know what, the work we've been doing, we've got this, and that there's valuable pieces that we can all bring to bear to this equation as we work through this crisis, but also as we get back to the next normal. And then I hope it will continue to spur imagination. A lot of what we've been doing in our law firms has really been driven by the imagination of our clients and the imagination of our practitioners saying, what if, or what can be the next thing we're doing? And I think this will continue to generate new questions and new insights that we ought to continue to experiment with. And I think that also will help drive us into the next normal.
Well, yeah, I think sorry, I would pick up on that, David, because I love the way you said that in terms of spurring imagination. I think that gets back to kind of what I said at the beginning. We're really all in this together in these uncharted waters. And, that's why I found this discussion so valuable. And again, a lot of what I do is gather senior leaders like yourself, and I talk to managing partners, and I talk about adoption of technology and law of the future. And I do, as many people have mentioned throughout this conversation, do think that this will continue to speed adoption of new technology in new ways and data analytics, but other examples that we've talked about.
Yeah, well, I know we did get a lot of questions here that we really haven't had a chance to get to, but I really want to take a moment to thank all of you for your time and your insights and your thoughts. This was a really great conversation. I appreciate it.
It's been a fun break from our day.
Yeah, you get to do a Zoom conference for a change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, before we all get on to our next one, thanks a lot, and thanks to everybody who attended and listened today. And that'll do it for today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye, everybody. That's it for today's program. A big thanks to all the panelists who took time to participate today, and a special thanks to Josh Becker, Head of Legal Analytics at LexisNexis, for helping to pull it all together. And a big thanks to Valerie Chan, founder of Platform PR, for all her hard work in helping to pull this panel together. I really appreciate it. And as always, thanks to Ben Ambrogi and his company Populous Radio for producing and engineering today's show. You can find out more about Populous at populousradio.com. That's it for this week. I'm Bob Ambrogi.